That
What
it would
a
be cutting
joke.
fat.
That's insane! You're beyond lost? You need a therapist and a mother that loves you.
We need to talk about Caleb Hammer, because his videos exemplify a way of thinking about money and ourselves that we have normalized for some reason, and we desperately need to change. If you're unfamiliar with Caleb, he hosts a show called Financial Audit. After 2 years on YouTube, it has over 2 million subscribers, and his business brings in 6 figures a month. Especially on YouTube, that amount of success in that short of a time, pretty impressive. The basic format of the show is Caleb sitting down with 1 or 2 people to look at their bank balances, their debts, and specifically their day-to-day spending in their bank statements. They try to talk about why they made these decisions, Caleb offers advice, he tries to make them a budget, and generally gives them an assessment of how they're doing financially. It's a kind of spiritual successor to The Ramsey Show, where you've got people bringing their real-life financial issues and someone giving them tough love, no-nonsense advice. But there's this kind of narrative around Caleb's show that while it might have started that way, it has since morphed into something much more mean-spirited and much closer to reality TV entertainment than any kind of personal finance education. And I want to dig into that narrative because I think it sheds some light on where our personal finance advice actually comes from, and because I think this notion that tough love is an effective method for changing people is silly and kooky and goofy and wrong. So let's talk about it. I'm Ben, and this is Sketchy Advice. We're just going to leave that one in. First off, a couple disclaimers up front, because I really want this to be a good faith discussion of the issues I see in Caleb's content. First, I work for YNAB. We make an app that is designed to help you with your money, and Caleb's business also makes an app designed to help you with your money. So we are technically competitors. I am not making this video because I am trying to win back people from Caleb's app or because I'm trying to scare you away from downloading his app. Personally, I would hope that the reason you would choose YNAB over Caleb's app is because you genuinely think YNAB is the better tool for spending, saving, and living joyfully. Not because I tricked you into not downloading a superior app. But I just wanted to flag that dynamic up front for the sake of transparency. Second, I am not trying to smear Caleb. I'm not trying to cancel him. If you watch his show and you keep watching it after this video, that's fine. I don't know him. I can't speak to his character or his intentions. I'm not going to comment on controversies he may or may not be involved in. If anything, I'm more using Caleb as a case study for how a lot of us think about money in our own lives. But I don't think I could make this video in good conscience without flagging up the fact that there are some trends on Caleb's channel that I personally find troubling. Throughout the course of this show's history, the way he presents his guests in his thumbnails and his titles has become increasingly degrading and I would argue dehumanizing. I think the way that he regularly mocks, berates, and gets into the personal lives of his guests to be highly inappropriate. And I really don't like the fact that his show regularly leans into highly damaging, problematic stereotypes around women. Now, Caleb says that all of his guests are made well aware of how they might be portrayed before they start filming.
But they are asked permission. I probably 2 times for the thumbnail and title before they come on. They're asked permission in the green room. Then they watch the onboarding video going over the thumbnail processes. They are given literally every opportunity in the world.
And that's definitely better than the alternative. But if the result is still leaning into damaging stereotypes, particularly around women, and treating your guests in a borderline abusive way, that's gross. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go back to the beginning of Caleb's channel. Like a lot of YouTubers, it seems like Caleb didn't exactly know what his show was going to be when he started. So his first video isn't a financial audit at all. It's about lessons he learned from a rental property. And in it, he says this.
Now, I'm not here to put myself on a high pedestal and tell other people what they should and should not do with their own money, but instead I want to go over my own personal experiences, and if people can learn from that, that's just a win-win.
And it is actually disorienting to see that statement at the beginning of this channel when the channel currently looks like this.
You didn't stop spending. You did not stop spending, like you said, or else they would not be maxed out if you've consolidated just a couple months ago.
Well,
Lies!
I tried. I'd probably pay.
No! You did not! Try!
So what happened? Well, let's look at Caleb's first financial audit. He begins the audit by saying this.
So you came up from San Antonio to Austin so that we could do this, kind of break down your finances and just have an open and frank and educational conversation around that.
And honestly, this is a really nice conversation. There's a lot of back and forth. Caleb allows his guests to explain themselves and speak and give further context. He asks good questions to help people reflect on their decisions.
What happens? You had to get 2 new tires. So like, what is this next month going to look like?
A lot of walking.
This whole video is really just a respectful discussion that allows this person to reflect on their spending decisions. And I am here for this type of show. I think this is great, especially if you haven't been looking at your money with a ton of intentionality. It can be really powerful to actually look at how you've been spending and have someone ask you questions that prompt you to ask, why did I do that? The comment section for this video is really interesting because a lot of it is people who are going back to the earlier episodes to watch, and a lot of them point out how much calmer and more respectful this interaction is. But interestingly, a lot of people chalk that up to how intelligent and respectful the guest is. But that leaves out the fact that Caleb's team picks who comes onto the show, and Caleb's reaction to things said in these earlier episodes, he's going to have very different reactions to in later episodes.
Does this make sense in your head? 13 overdraft fees.
Yes,
You're literally paying the bank for you to spend money.
that's true.
Amount due this period. Pass the pass. Pass due. Why? 2 in a row. Why? Why do you accept that?
It's
What is this?
The change in guests and Caleb's behavior are both things that can ultimately be traced back to Caleb himself. But a lot of these earlier episodes are just like this one. They are frank discussions of finances with a little bit of saltiness here and there. So where do we start to see a real shift? I would point to this video. It's the first one on Caleb's channel to get over 1 million views. I think this video is where we start to see the true Caleb Hammer financial audit formula emerge. This guy is a grad student studying scenic design, something that he's clearly very passionate about, but probably isn't going to get him a high-paying job in the future. He has pretty alarming amounts of debt, and at various points in this video, Caleb gets really worked up. You can see this exact same formula on display in Caleb's most successful video. Not only are the thumbnail and title literally identical, but everything in this formula gets turned up to 11. Rather than just a theater student who doesn't have a great grasp of his finances, we have a woman who is a spiritual life coach who is actually making a good amount of money, but has wound up in absolutely absurd, seemingly unnecessary amounts of debt. And Caleb, understandably, gets absolutely exasperated throughout this episode. All of that together leads to this really interesting moment.
Are you in a place where you should be giving that kind of advice to people if you can't even stop yourself from something as basic as spending?
Well, I don't give people financial advice.
I know, not financial advice, but life advice. If you can't even take control of your own misbehavior, should you be giving advice to other people?
Is that a valid question? Sure. But it also underscores one of the resonating themes throughout this show. One of the core tenets of financial audit seems to be that the reason people make bad financial decisions is because they are dumb, childish, or just bad people. And Caleb might not agree with that characterization, but I would argue that his show is making that point constantly. Just look at how often these words come up in the titles of his videos versus how often these words come up. And you can see this mentality reflected back to Caleb in his comment sections. Whether or not he intends this message, it is what a lot of his audience is hearing. It seems like in the beginning, Caleb is kind of resistant to this idea. In this video, he leaves a pinned comment kind of in response to people who are dunking on this guy, saying, hey, listen, I've actually gotten to know him. He's kind of a cool guy. But in later videos, the pinned comments or the descriptions look more like this. It's leaning into the judgment, not pushing back against it. Now, why are videos like this so successful? I think there's a few reasons. One, if we're honest, it makes us feel a lot better about ourselves. Two, I think just listening to these people talk is fascinating.
Why'd you not work for another couple months and save up as much money as possible?
Well, when you got a fire in your pants, you kind of just got to get up and get rid of it. How much harder would it be to put your dream off forever and then die without ever having done
Yeah,
it?
2 months is not forever.
2 months becomes 6 months, becomes a year, becomes
Or 2 months
years.
becomes 2 months if you actually have a plan. Okay, but two months was an example. 6 months is nothing when it comes to a lifetime.
But when you're not doing something that truly makes you happy or what you want, is it worth it?
Like, I just kept watching because I wanted to see how far down the rabbit hole we were going to go. But third, and I think this is really crucial, there is something cathartic about watching these videos. A lot of people attribute the success of Caleb Hammer to kind of schadenfreude. It's just kind of fascinating to watch train wrecks, and I think that's true. But I think there's also something to this idea of telling people off. We all have people in our lives who make questionable decisions that upset us, but we don't really feel like we're in a place to confront them. We don't feel like we're the right person to call them out on their nonsense. And there is something cathartic about watching a seemingly delusional or bad or childish person get called out in a really stark way. But here's the thing, if that is the formula to making a good financial audit video, then that means two things. One, you need a guest who makes us all go, I want them to get called out. And you need Caleb to have a pretty profound confrontation with that person, which leads to this cycle of wilder and wilder guests being brought onto the show and Caleb becoming increasingly hostile right out the gate. This core formula that financial audit is built on leads to content that is less and less actually educational and more just an episode of Jerry Springer. Why does Caleb stick to that formula then? Again, I'm not Caleb, but one reason you could imagine is because this video got 90,000 views and this video got a whole lot more. On YouTube, the success of your videos largely depends on two things: how many people click on the thumbnail when they see it, and how long they watch the video once they've clicked. And Caleb's grotesque thumbnails and titles, paired with this odd combination of like the train wreck effect and catharsis, lead to videos that are highly clickable and keep people watching. And I think this is something that we all need to increasingly think about when we go to the internet looking for advice. We are not getting advice from people in a vacuum. There is an ecosystem of content creation that is pressuring creators in certain directions. Creators feel a constant pressure to make thumbnails that people will click on. It is why Graham Stephan's entire YouTube channel looks like it is constantly on fire. And while many people are willing to stick around for deep dives and complex explanations and nuance, many more people are willing to stick around for extreme emotions, drama, or oversimplified solutions to complex problems. It is a tension that, as a creator myself, I feel all the time. There is a tension between creating something that people are going to want to click on and creating something that will provide real, tangible, lasting value to people. I think it's crucial to remember that a lot of the stuff we see on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or wherever is optimized to be consumed, not necessarily optimized to be implemented or effective. But that's all mostly a sidebar. The thing I really want to focus on here is the way people defend Caleb's channel. There's this idea that yes, Caleb is maybe too mean, yes, his guests are kind of wild, but ultimately what he's doing is a service. And you can hear an articulation of this back in that 1 million view video.
You need to see how dire the situation is. I'm going hard because you have just been living life like this doesn't matter, and you need to be awoken to the disaster you've gotten yourself in.
There's this narrative that what Caleb is doing is ultimately redemptive. It's kind of a necessary evil. No, it's not the nicest thing in the world, but it's the only thing that's going to actually get through to people. When Caleb talks about the origin of his show, he says this a lot.
I'm too harsh on the guest?
Yeah.
I have the conversation in the way that I wish someone had with me a decade ago.
The core justification for the way Caleb operates his show is that people need harsh truths and tough love. And first off, just to state the obvious, just because you say something harshly doesn't mean it's true. A lot of people, when they say tough love, what they're really saying is, I'm justified to say this in a harsh or demeaning way, or to do something that is harsh, because that's the only way to get through to this person. This notion that what people really need is tough love and harsh truth is deeply embedded in our culture for some reason, which is wild, because there is basically no psychological research that tough love is an effective method at all. The two places you see tough love talked about the most are in parenting research and in research on addiction intervention. And in both cases, researchers seem to generally agree that tough love is insufficient at best and radically harmful at worst. Watch these guests in these shows. A lot of them go into what clearly seems like a fight or flight response. And one thing we know about fight or flight is that you really can't learn anything in that mode. Usually what you're trying to do is alleviate the danger as quickly as possible. Psychological research into what's called authoritarian parenting, which tends to use this kind of tough love, harsh truth approach, show that those kids raised that way do tend to behave better, but they also tend to be much worse at emotional regulation and making their own decisions. Two crucially important skills when it comes to managing your money. I'm not a sociologist, so I can't speak definitively to where this idea that tough love is like the way comes from, but I suspect there are two key sources: movies and our own personal experience. We see these kind of tough love moments in movies all the time, where like a mentor just kind of says the harsh truth to the protagonist, or an insufferable character finally has someone call them out on their BS. And those moments in movies feel really good. You're like, yeah, you tell him. But it's pretty obvious why movies do that. It's a lot easier to film that scene than to show a character gradually changing their mindset and behavior over time until something substantial emerges. And that gradual change wouldn't be that entertaining to watch versus someone having a gotcha moment. And two, again, it's cathartic. It feels good. Just because it makes for good TV doesn't mean it's effective in real life. In half of these movies, that person just winds up getting punched in the face. And you shouldn't do that. But I think more powerful is many people have had an experience in their own life where someone spoke the blunt truth to them and it had some kind of transformational effect. And that's totally valid. But I do think we need to draw a distinction between someone told me something I didn't want to hear at the time but I needed to hear, and someone low-key insulted me with something that happened to be true. And if this is what happened to you, I want you to ask yourself, would it have been that different if the person wasn't mean about it? If they had just told you the truth? Another way to think about it is, can you think of any times that a parent or a coach or a peer or a boss or whoever told you something in a really harsh way that happened to be true, and you just totally wrote them off because they were being a jerk? If I had to guess, I would imagine you have a lot more of those moments than you do this magical, transformative, grumpy mentor moment. If you've had a transformative moment, I would be willing to guess that for most people, it came from someone that you knew deep down in your guts really, really cared about you. And the weight of that is what carried you into some kind of transformation, not the mean words. And whether we're talking about Dave Ramsey or Caleb Hammer or some person on TikTok or whatever, these people, by definition, cannot give you tough love. They do not know you. They do not love you. They are just telling you things that may or may not be true and doing it in a rude way. At the end of episodes of Financial Audit, Caleb tries to make a budget for people based on their income. And you think this is kind of the moment that is redemptive. This is where all that tough love comes home to roost in a practical plan. But in his recent episodes, he constantly says things like this.
You're underwater by $222.97. What a joke. What a joke.
Well, then
What
it would
a
be cutting that.
joke.
Or sometimes he doesn't even make the budget. He just tells the person that they're too far gone.
Dude, there's nothing I can do here. I could budget you. There's budget. Sure. But you are lost beyond lost.
In interviews, Caleb says that his team tries to do everything that they can to support these people financially, including things like free sessions of therapy and all kinds of stuff. And that's great. But if this is the beginning of your financial transformation, you're beginning it with fear and shame and anxiety. And none of those are strong motivators for lasting change. I've wondered if I should make a video about Caleb for quite a while now, and the thing that finally sealed the deal for me was reading this comment on one of his videos. After coming across Caleb's channel, I now spend my money as if my bank statements will be audited by Caleb himself. This is someone who, with all the best intentions, claims that what now motivates his spending is imagining what Caleb would say if Caleb saw his spending. It's internalizing this critical, tough love, harsh truth voice that's going to call you out on your BS and beat you up whenever you make a mistake. And I think so many of us have learned to internalize this voice, whether it's from our parents or personal finance stuff that we read or whatever. We think that the way forward to growing up or better transformation of our finances or whatever is to be harsh to ourselves. But core to this whole voice is this idea that if you make bad decisions, it's a signal about your character or your intelligence or your maturity. And inherent to that whole philosophy is this idea that you should motivate yourself by what kind of this strict parental voice would say if you spent this way or if you took out this debt or whatever. And again, there is no research to show that that is effective. If anything, it seems to be the opposite. Caleb has another channel dedicated to follow-ups from financial audit. And this is kind of meant to be a proof of concept that while this is kind of a harsh reality check for this people, it ultimately means that they come around. So you would expect this channel to be really positive and happy and full of really good results. Nope, it looks like this. And the really pernicious thing about this way of thinking that I need to beat myself up in order to shut up and grow up is it becomes this vicious cycle. Because if the research shows that this doesn't work or maybe is counterproductive, that means there's a really good chance that it's not going to work for you. And when that happens, the temptation is to think, oh, I must not be going hard enough on myself. I need to be more strict, more disciplined, more tough. Which means you're either going to do that, which is miserable and probably going to continue to be ineffective, or you're going to give up, which feels terrible. Because you can look at Caleb's follow-up channel and be like, wow, these people just really couldn't hack it to make the change. Or you could say, maybe this method isn't effective to begin with. Maybe internalizing these voices or receiving advice in this way is actually moving us backward, not forward. Okay, I'm starting to sound like Caleb. All right, whew, ha. This is why in a previous video, I argued that one of the most overlooked skills in personal finance is forgiving yourself. Because that is something that is scary to do. If you have been told and you are convinced that the way to improve is to be this tough, strict parent with yourself, then it's actually really scary to let go of that and forgive yourself for past mistakes you've made. Because what if you just devolve into something even worse than you are now? But actual research, like what I talked about in that video, seems to suggest that when we approach our past mistakes with a sense of compassion and forgiveness and a desire to learn from them, we stop avoiding these things that have been causing us shame and stress, and we can move forward in a productive way. When we fill our feed and our heads with these voices that are screaming at us, you're doing this wrong, you need to do it this way, what we're actually doing is we're removing trust from ourselves. We must not be able to do it, so we need someone else to tell us how. But I'm here to tell you, you can do this. That's not to say you might not need help. If you're dealing with certain neurodivergences or patterns of behavior or trauma or whatever, you might very well need professional help or help from your community to move forward in a positive way. But what you don't need to do is constantly remind yourself that you messed up. Something I would encourage you to do is next time you're thinking about money, whether it's looking at your budget or making a spending decision or whatever it is, just pay attention to how you talk to yourself. Do you ask yourself questions? Do you think about what you care about? Do you consider your feelings? Do you sound more like a referee or a coach? And I don't mean like a Bobby Knight coach. I mean like a Ted Lasso coach. Money does not have to be this constant experience of nodding along as the voice in your head berates you for all the mistakes you've made or tells you why buying this is too irresponsible or whatever. It can be a deeply fulfilling, empowering, life-changing, liberating, joyful experience where you are becoming more fully you. And you can do that while still being smart and responsible and practical and all that stuff. And if that's an approach to money that you'd like to see, then you can subscribe here. I'm on that algorithm too, baby. Let's go. Caleb Hammer is not the first person to build a platform on scolding people for screwing up their lives by being too dumb or too this or too that. And he's definitely not going to be the last. But the next time someone like that comes across your feed, I would encourage you to remember this. Just because it's good TV doesn't mean it's good advice. Bye.